Hello and welcome to the Birds and Braves podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Luke Winstel and I appreciate your support of the show. Today I'll be talking Atlanta Hawks and specifically Dennis Schroder, a guy who's not quite as young as John Collins and Taurean Prince, two first-round picks of the Hawks in the last 2 years, but he's a big part of the Hawks' future, and he's also part of my series talking about the Hawks' rebuild and the young players that it's centered around, and how they have fared through the first 3 months of the NBA season. So to start off, I'll give his stat line. He's the team's leading scorer with 19.8 points per game. He's shooting 45.1% from the field, 31.8% from behind the arc, and 85.4% from the charity stripe. He's averaging 3 rebounds per game, 6.7 assists per game, which leads the team, 1.1 steal per game, and 2.5 turnovers per game, and he is the point guard of the present and of the future. And the Atlanta against the Dallas Mavericks game, the night before he sat out the game against the Thunder with an ankle injury, and Atlanta was forced to start Ken Bazemore at point guard, but the Hawks did a surprisingly good job against the Thunder and nearly knocked them off before Russell Westbrook hit a buzzer-beater 3. Back to the Dallas game, after sitting out the Thunder game with that ankle injury, he found his shooting stroke early against the Mavs, which was really good to see, especially since Schroder has struggled with the three-point shot this season and really the overall jump shot since late November. In his last 14 games entering the Dallas game, Schroder was 11 for 47, which is 23.4%, and he'd made more than 1 3 in a game only one time during that stretch. Against Dallas, Schroder made 4 out of his 8 3-point shots and made 3 out of his 5 long 2 jump shots. He showed a lot of very encouraging signs in that game, and the main thing I'd like to see him continue to improve going forward is the jumper. And outside of that, he's been successful and the team's leading scorer this season because, according to an article by PeachtreeHoops.com, he's been transforming his offensive game. As he's struggled with his shooting, he's become more careful as a ball handler, and in his first 15 games this season, he shot 45% on field goals and 36.4% from the three-point line, while averaging 7.1 assists per game and 3.2 turnovers per game, and his turnover-to-assist ratio was 2.2. In 15 games since, he has shot 45.3% on field goals, 27.3% from the three-point line, while averaging 6.3 assists per game and 1.8 turnovers, and the turnover-to-assist ratio was 3.5. So that article from Peachtree Hoops tells you a lot about Dennis Schroder and really how he's been reducing the turnovers, and the shot started to come back against Dallas. It has to continue. He's a guy that should not be shooting down at 31.8% from 3. He should be shooting more in the 38 to 40% range, and he has shown he can be a good three-point shooter. Just this season, it hasn't been there for him. Schroder's an electric player, a dynamic player, and one of the Hawks starters of the future. Right now, I see them as having 3 of those guys. They have Prince, they have Collins, and they have Schroder. And I think it's time for the Hawks to go out this offseason and get 2 more impact guys for the starting 5. And then the team could be competing in the East as soon as 2 years from now, especially if they can solidify the bench. And speaking of the bench, very soon I'll be releasing a podcast talking about some of the bench guys and some of the supplemental guys that have helped the Hawks along this season and my thoughts on them, so be sure to tune in for that podcast as well. But for Atlanta, they are still in line at this point to get the number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft. That could be one of those 2 impact starters, and then if they could get one more in free agency, they could really start to build and start their run toward contention. That's all I have today. Thank you for tuning into the Birds and Braves podcast. I'm Luke Winstel, and I appreciate your support of the show. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you soon with another show.